Marcus Chen pressed his back against the cold metal wall of the abandoned mining station, his breathing steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of failing life support systems. 3 years had passed since the Cathera first attacked human colonies, leaving devastation in their wake. 3 years since humanity learned they were not alone in the universe, and that their new neighbors viewed them as nothing more than prey. The emergency beacon had stopped transmitting 12 hours ago. Whatever had happened to the research team on Kepler 442b, it wasn't good. Marcus and his extraction team had arrived expecting to find survivors huddled in safe rooms, not this eerie emptiness that seemed to swallow sound itself. "Delta Team?" "Report," Marcus whispered into his comm unit, the words barely audible even to himself. Static answered him. He grimaced and adjusted his grip on the modified plasma rifle, a weapon that had been hastily developed after humanity's first disastrous encounters with the Cathera. The aliens' natural armor could deflect most conventional weapons, but plasma burned through their chitinous shells like acid through paper. A soft clicking sound echoed from somewhere above. Marcus froze, every muscle in his body tensing. He knew that sound. Every human who had survived a Cathara encounter knew that sound. It was the noise their mandibles made when they tasted fear in the air, when they knew their prey was close. The clicking grew louder, more rhythmic, almost like a twisted form of Morse code. Marcus realized with growing horror that it was Morse code. The creature was tapping out a message. "I remember you, little human." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. The Cathera were hunters, not linguists. They communicated through pheromones and subsonic vibrations, not human languages. Yet somehow, this one had learned. It had studied them. It had adapted. The temperature in the corridor dropped noticeably as the creature's presence grew stronger. Marcus could smell the distinctive metallic scent that all Cathera carried, like copper pennies mixed with ozone. His enhanced hearing, a modification that had become standard for all human military personnel, picked up the subtle scraping of claws against metal somewhere in the ventilation system above. "I know you're listening," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying just enough to be heard. "I remember you too." The clicking stopped abruptly. In the sudden silence, Marcus could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. He wasn't lying. He did remember this particular Cathara. The scar across his left shoulder was a permanent reminder of their last encounter on the colony ship Endeavor. Marcus had been part of a civilian evacuation team when the Cathara pack had attacked. He'd watched friends die, seen families torn apart, barely escaped with his own life. But humans were nothing if not adaptable. In the 3 years since first contact, they had studied their enemies obsessively. They learned that Cathara hunted in packs, that they were ambush predators who preferred to isolate their prey. They discovered that the aliens were vulnerable to certain frequencies of sound, that their armor had weak points at the joints, that their enhanced senses could be overwhelmed with the right countermeasures. Most importantly, humans learned that the Cathara underestimated them. The aliens saw humans as simple prey animals incapable of true adaptation or learning. They were wrong. A section of ceiling plating crashed to the floor behind Marcus, the sound echoing through the empty corridors like a gunshot. He didn't turn around. Instead, he reached for the small device clipped to his belt and activated it with a subtle movement of his thumb. The ultrasonic emitter began broadcasting at a frequency just beyond human hearing, but perfectly designed to cause disorientation in Cathara nervous systems. The clicking became erratic, almost panicked. Marcus smiled grimly. The creature might have learned Morse code, but it hadn't learned about human technological adaptation. 3 years? Marcus said, turning slowly to face the shadow that had dropped from the ceiling. 3 years since you killed my team on the Endeavor. 3 years since you thought you understood what humans were capable of. The Cathara that faced him was massive, easily 8 feet tall with the characteristic blue-black carapace that made them nearly invisible in low light. Its 4 arms ended in razor-sharp claws, and its elongated head housed compound eyes that could track movement in complete darkness. But there was something different about this one. Scars covered its shell, and one of its arms moved stiffly, as if it had been damaged and healed incorrectly. "You survived," the creature said, its voice a horrible combination of clicks and synthetic tones produced by what must have been an artificial voice box. "Interesting. Most prey does not survive a second encounter." Marcus kept his weapon lowered, but ready. "We're not prey anymore. We adapted." The Cathara tilted its head, a gesture that was almost curious. "Yes, I have observed this. Your species has become more challenging. But adaptation is not unique to humans. We too can learn. We too can change." The implications of that statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. If the Cathara were adapting as well, learning from their encounters with humanity, then the war was about to become far more complicated. The advantages humans had gained through technological innovation and tactical adaptation might not last. "You came here for a reason," Marcus said, his finger hovering near his weapon's trigger. "The research team, what did you do to them?" "They provided valuable information," the Cathara replied, its artificial voice carrying an unsettling note of satisfaction. "Your species' efforts to understand our biology, our weaknesses, such dedication to knowledge, even in the face of extinction. Admirable, in its way." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The research team hadn't been randomly attacked. They'd been targeted specifically because of their work on Cathara biology. This creature hadn't just learned to communicate in human languages, it had learned to think strategically like a human. "But knowledge flows both ways, doesn't it?" the Cathara continued, taking a step closer. "Just as you study us, we study you. Your fear responses, your social structures, your technological capabilities. Did you think we would remain static while you evolved?" The creature's compound eyes seemed to focus on the ultrasonic emitter at Marcus's belt. With a movement too fast to follow, one of its claws struck the device, destroying it in a shower of sparks. The disorienting frequency cut off abruptly. "Crude, but effective," the Cathara observed. "But we have developed countermeasures for such toys." Marcus raised his weapon, the plasma charge already building with a high-pitched whine. "Then let's see how you've adapted to this." He fired without hesitation, the superheated plasma bolt streaking toward the creature's center mass. But instead of standing still like the Cathara of old, this one moved with fluid grace, dodging to the side with inhuman speed. The plasma bolt struck the wall behind it, leaving a molten crater in the metal. The Cathara laughed, a sound like breaking glass mixed with the cry of a dying bird. "Yes, we learned about your plasma weapons as well. Effective against stationary targets, less so against those who understand their limitations." Marcus was already moving, rolling behind a fallen support beam as the creature's claws carved gouges in the floor where he had been standing. His mind raced through tactical options, but every scenario he could imagine ended poorly. This Cathara wasn't just physically superior, it was tactically intelligent in a way that previous encounters had never suggested. "You're wondering how to survive this encounter," the creature said, its voice carrying easily through the corridor despite the fact that Marcus couldn't see it. "How to overcome an enemy that has learned from your previous victories. But perhaps you're asking the wrong question." "Enlighten me," Marcus called back, checking his weapon's charge level. 60% remaining. "Perhaps the question is not how to overcome us," the Cathara replied, its voice seeming to come from multiple directions at once. "Perhaps the question is whether your species' adaptation has progressed far enough to survive what comes next." The implications were clear. This wasn't just a random attack or even revenge for past defeats. This was reconnaissance. This creature was gathering intelligence on human adaptive capabilities, testing their responses, measuring their technological advancement, and when it was finished, it would report back to others of its kind. Marcus closed his eyes and forced his breathing to slow. 3 years of training, 3 years of technological development, 3 years of learning how to fight an enemy that had seemed impossible to defeat. Humanity had come far, but apparently so had their enemies. The sound of claws on metal grew closer. Marcus gripped his weapon tighter and prepared to discover just how far human adaptation could take them when faced with an enemy that refused to remain predictable. The hunt was about to begin again, but this time, neither predator nor prey would be quite what they had been before. In the darkness of the abandoned station, 2 species that had each spent 3 years learning how to kill the other were about to test the limits of their evolution. Only one would leave to share what they had learned. The silence stretched between them like a held breath. Marcus counted heartbeats, measuring the rhythm against the nearly inaudible scraping of claws on metal that told him the Kythera was moving, circling, evaluating. 3 years of survival had taught him that patience was often the difference between life and death, but this creature had clearly learned the same lesson. Marcus activated his secondary communication system, a quantum entanglement transmitter that the Kythera hopefully hadn't encountered before. The device would send an instantaneous signal to Earth Command regardless of distance or interference, but it would also reveal his exact location to any sensors the creature might have. The risk was calculated. If this Kythera had truly adapted as much as it claimed, then humanity needed to know immediately. The tactical implications were staggering. An enemy that could learn, adapt, and counter human advantages in real time would require a complete restructuring of military doctrine. Earth Command, this is Marcus Chen, designation Omega-7, he whispered into the transmitter. Priority Alpha Alert. Kythera evolution confirmed. They're adapting our tactics, our technology, our languages. Recommend immediate implementation of Protocol Lazarus. Protocol Lazarus was humanity's last resort, a plan so drastic that it had only been theoretical until now. It involved the complete abandonment of current defensive strategies in favor of something far more desperate and unpredictable. The response came instantly, the quantum link carrying Admiral Morrison's voice across impossible distances. Confirmed Omega-7. Lazarus protocols are being implemented fleet-wide. How long can you maintain observation of the subject? Marcus almost laughed. How long could he maintain observation while being hunted by a creature that had spent 3 years learning how to kill humans more efficiently? Unknown, Command. This one's different. It's not hunting for food or territory. It's conducting intelligence gathering. Understood. Maintain contact if possible. Every second of data is crucial. The transmission cut off, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the growing certainty that he was about to become a very expensive lesson in human adaptability. The Kythera was close now, close enough that he could feel the subtle vibrations through the metal flooring that indicated its massive weight shifting from position to position. Marcus reached into his tactical pack and withdrew a device that looked like a simple metal sphere. The neural disruptor was one of humanity's newest weapons, designed based on their growing understanding of Kythera biology. It generated a specific electromagnetic pulse that interfered with the creature's nervous systems, causing temporary paralysis, but it was also untested against a potentially adapted opponent. I can sense your fear, human. The Kythera's voice drifted through the corridor, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. But there is something else. Excitement? Anticipation? Your emotional responses have become more complex than we first observed. Marcus frowned. The creature was reading his biometrics somehow, possibly through heat signature analysis or perhaps something more sophisticated. But it was misinterpreting the data, which suggested that despite its adaptations, the Kythera still didn't fully understand human psychology. "You're right about the anticipation," Marcus called back. "We've been waiting for one of you to get smart enough for a real conversation." "Conversation?" The artificial voice carried what might have been amusement. "Is that what you call this exchange where one of us will inevitably consume the other?" "That depends on who's really hunting whom." Marcus activated the neural disruptor and rolled it across the floor toward where he estimated the Kythera's position to be. The device would have a radius of approximately 20 meters, more than enough to cover the corridor. He counted down from 5, then triggered the pulse. The electromagnetic burst was invisible to human senses. But Marcus knew it had activated by the sudden whine of overloading electronics throughout the station. Emergency lighting flickered and died, leaving them in complete darkness. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. Then the Kythera's laughter echoed through the darkness, unchanged and unaffected. "Ingenious," the creature said, its voice now clearly coming from directly above Marcus. "An electromagnetic weapon designed to disrupt our neural pathways, but you assume our biology remains static. We have learned to shield our essential functions, to root around damaged systems. Adaptation, as you humans say, is survival." Marcus felt his heart sink. If the Kythera had developed biological countermeasures to electromagnetic weapons, then humanity's technological advantage was even smaller than they'd realized. But the creature had also revealed something important in its response. It was shielding essential functions, which meant it had non-essential ones that might still be vulnerable. Marcus reached for his final gambit, a weapon so new that even Earth Command wasn't sure it would work. The quantum destabilizer looked like an ordinary flashlight, but it generated a field that interfered with the quantum coherence of complex molecules. In theory, it could cause catastrophic cellular breakdown in any organism. In practice, it had only been tested on tissue samples. "You're thinking very loudly, human," the Kythera observed. "I can sense the electrical activity in your brain increasing. Planning something desperate, perhaps?" Marcus realized with growing alarm that the creature wasn't just reading his biometrics anymore. It was somehow detecting the electrical activity of his thoughts. The implications were terrifying. If the Kythera could read human thought patterns, then every tactical advantage humanity had gained could be countered before it was even implemented. "How?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious despite his precarious situation. "Your species broadcasts constantly," the Kythera replied, its voice now carrying genuine satisfaction. "Electromagnetic radiation from your neural activity, heat signatures from your emotional responses, chemical traces from your fear and aggression. We have learned to read the symphony of human existence. In some ways, we know you better than you know yourselves." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's failing life support. If this creature was telling the truth, then the Kythera had achieved something approaching technological telepathy, at least where humans were concerned. The strategic advantages of such capability were overwhelming. But there was something the creature had said that struck Marcus as odd. It spoke of reading human responses, of understanding human biology and psychology. But it had said nothing about understanding human nature, human culture, or the deeper aspects of what made humanity unique in the galaxy. "You can read our biology," Marcus said carefully. "But can you understand why a single human would stay behind to fight when escape was possible? Why we sacrifice ourselves for strangers? Why we keep adapting even when adaptation seems pointless?" The silence that followed was different from before. There was uncertainty in it. A pause that suggested the Kythera was genuinely considering the question. "Your self-destructive tendencies are indeed puzzling," the creature admitted. "From a logical standpoint, individual sacrifice for the benefit of the group is inefficient, yet your species consistently chooses this path. We have observed humans dying to protect offspring that are not their own, fighting to defend territory they will never see again, sharing resources even when doing so threatens their own survival. Marcus smiled in the darkness. And that puzzles you. It does. Such behavior is contrary to natural selection. It should have been eliminated from your genetic code eons ago. Yet it persists, and even appears to be strengthening as your species faces extinction. Maybe that's why you'll lose this war, Marcus said, raising the quantum destabilizer. You understand our biology, our technology, even our thoughts, but you don't understand our spirit. He triggered the device, hoping against hope that the Kythera's adaptations hadn't extended to quantum-level cellular protection. The field generator hummed to life, filling the corridor with invisible energy that should have begun breaking down the creature's molecular structure. The Kythera screamed. It was a sound unlike anything Marcus had ever heard, a combination of pain, rage, and something that might have been fear. The creature's massive form became visible as bioluminescent patches along its carapace flared to life, apparently some kind of stress response. But instead of collapsing or dying, the Kythera did something unexpected. It began to change. Marcus watched in horrified fascination as the creature's body seemed to flow like liquid, its form shifting and adapting in real time to counter the quantum field. Sections of its carapace became translucent, allowing the destabilizing energy to pass through harmlessly. Other areas thickened and darkened, creating barriers against the quantum effect. Impossible, Marcus whispered. Not impossible, the Kythera replied, its voice strained but still functional. Merely unprecedented. Your species continues to surprise us with weapons we had not anticipated. But surprise is temporary. Adaptation is permanent. The creature's form stabilized, now noticeably different from what it had been before. Where once it had been purely the traditional Kythera design, it now showed clear modifications, adaptations that had occurred in real time to counter Marcus's weapon. You see, the Kythera continued, its breathing gradually returning to normal. We too possess what you might call spirit, the drive to survive, to overcome, to adapt beyond the boundaries of what should be possible. In this, perhaps, our species are more alike than different. Marcus felt his weapon's power cell depleting rapidly. The quantum destabilizer hadn't been designed for prolonged use, and the creature's adaptations were requiring more and more energy to counter. In perhaps 30 seconds, he would be defenseless. But 30 seconds could be enough for one final gambit. Marcus activated his personal beacon, not the military-grade quantum transmitter, but the simple emergency locator that every human carried. It would signal his location to any nearby human forces, but more importantly, it would also activate a dead man's switch in his neural implant. The implant contained a complete record of everything he had seen and heard during this encounter. If he died, the data would be automatically transmitted via quantum burst to Earth Command. The Kythera might kill him, but humanity would learn everything he had discovered about their enemy's new capabilities. You're transmitting again, the Kythera observed. Sending information to your fellows, ensuring that your death serves a purpose. There is that self-sacrifice we spoke of. You understand the action, but not the motivation, Marcus replied. That's why you'll lose. Perhaps. Or perhaps you underestimate our capacity for understanding. We have learned much about humanity in 3 years. But you have also taught us something unexpected. What's that? That adaptation is not simply about survival. It is about becoming something more than what you were before. In fighting you, in studying you, in learning from you, we too have changed. We are no longer the same species that first attacked your colonies. Marcus felt his weapon die, its power cell finally exhausted. He was now completely defenseless against a creature that had proven itself capable of adapting to every weapon humanity could deploy against it. So what happens now? Marcus asked. Now, the Kythera replied, moving closer. We discover whether human adaptation extends beyond technology and tactics. We discover whether your spirit truly makes you different from every other species we have encountered. The creature's claws glinted in the emergency lighting as it prepared to strike. Marcus stood his ground, his hand resting on one final device he hadn't mentioned to the creature. Not a weapon, but something potentially far more dangerous to both their species. The hunt was about to reach its conclusion, but neither predator nor prey would emerge unchanged from what was about to happen. The device in Marcus's hand was small, unremarkable, and absolutely forbidden by every treaty humanity had ever signed with itself. The biological warfare agent contained within the tiny capsule was designed not to kill, but to do something far more profound and terrifying. It would rewrite genetic code on a fundamental level, forcing rapid evolutionary changes in any organism exposed to it. The research had been conducted in absolute secrecy on a station so classified that its existence was known only to a handful of people. The scientists who developed it had called it the Pandora virus, and they had destroyed all samples except for this one. This single test unit that Marcus carried as the ultimate last resort. "You hesitate," the Cathara observed, its four arms spread wide as it approached. "Your hand rests on something, but you do not use it. Another weapon? Or perhaps something you fear to unleash?" Marcus looked up at the creature that had adapted beyond every countermeasure humanity could devise. Its carapace had already begun to shift back toward its original configuration, now that the quantum destabilizer was no longer active. Real-time evolutionary adaptation. The implications were staggering. "Tell me something," Marcus said, his thumb hovering over the capsule's activation switch. "When you adapt, when you change your biology to counter our weapons, do you choose what changes, or does it happen automatically?" The Cathara tilted its elongated head, compound eyes focusing on Marcus with what might have been curiosity. "An interesting question. The process is both voluntary and involuntary. We can direct certain adaptations consciously, but the deeper changes, the ones that ensure survival, those occur beyond our control. Why do you ask?" "Because I'm about to do something that will force both our species to adapt in ways neither of us can control or predict." Marcus activated the capsule and threw it at the floor between them. The device shattered on impact, releasing a cloud of what looked like glittering dust into the air. The Pandora virus was airborne now, and in the enclosed space of the station's corridor, both he and the Cathara would be exposed within seconds. "Biological weapon," the Cathara said, its voice carrying no fear but rather a note of professional interest. "Attempting to poison us both? A final act of spite?" "Not poison," Marcus replied, already feeling the first effects as the virus entered his respiratory system. Evolution. The virus had been designed based on humanity's exhaustive study of Cathara biology over the past 3 years. It targeted specific genetic markers that were common to all known life forms, forcing rapid mutations in cellular structure, neural pathways, and fundamental biological processes. But the scientists who created it had discovered something unexpected during their research. The genetic markers they were targeting weren't just common to most life forms. They were identical across species in ways that suggested a common origin. The virus wouldn't just force evolution in humans and Cathara separately, it would push both species toward genetic convergence. Marcus felt his vision blur as the virus began its work. His neural implant was recording everything, but he wasn't sure how much longer it would function as his brain chemistry began to change. The sensation was indescribable, like feeling his DNA rewriting itself in real time. The Cathara was experiencing its own transformation. Its carapace began to shift colors, cycling through patterns that had no equivalent in normal Cathara biology. Its 4 arms moved in jerky, uncontrolled motions as new neural pathways formed and reformed. "What have you done?" the creature gasped, its artificial voice box struggling to process the new sounds its changed vocal cords were producing. "I've forced the ultimate adaptation," Marcus replied, his own voice sounding strange to his ears. "The virus is pushing both our species toward genetic convergence. We're becoming something new, something that combines the best survival traits of both humans and Cathara." The implications hit them both simultaneously. If they survived the transformation, they would no longer be purely human or purely Cathara. They would be something unprecedented in galactic history, a hybrid species that combined human creativity and adaptability with Cathara physical superiority and sensory capabilities. But more than that, the virus was designed to spread. It was already being carried through the station's air recycling system, and when rescue teams eventually arrived, they would carry it back to their ships, to their bases, to Earth itself. Similarly, any Cathara forces that came looking for their missing scout would also be exposed. "You've doomed both our species," the Cathara said, but there was something in its voice that might have been admiration rather than accusation. "Or I've saved them," Marcus countered, watching as his hands began to change, the skin taking on a subtle metallic sheen while maintaining human flexibility. "How long have our people been fighting? 3 years of escalating warfare, each side developing new ways to kill the other. Where does it end?" The Cathara was changing too, its rigid carapace becoming more flexible while retaining its protective qualities. Its compound eyes were shifting, developing the ability to focus like human eyes while maintaining their superior light-gathering capabilities. "You believe forced evolution will create peace?" the creature asked. "I believe it will create understanding," Marcus replied. "When both our species share common biology, common capabilities, common limitations, the reasons for war become harder to justify." Marcus felt his consciousness expanding as new neural pathways formed. The sensation was overwhelming, like suddenly being able to see colors that had never existed before or hear sounds beyond the normal range of human perception. But along with the expanded sensory input came something unexpected. He could sense the Cathara's thoughts, not clearly but as vague emotional impressions. The creature was experiencing fear, wonder, and something that might have been hope. It was also thinking about its own people, wondering what would happen when the virus reached them, whether they would see this change as evolution or abomination. "I can sense your thoughts," the Cathara said, and Marcus realized the connection worked both ways. "This is beyond anything we anticipated. Our two species linked at a fundamental level." "It's what the virus was designed to do," Marcus explained, his enhanced neural capabilities making complex explanations easier despite his altered state. "Create genetic bridges between species, force compatibility where none existed before." The transformation was accelerating now, both of their bodies adapting and changing at a rate that should have been impossible. Marcus found himself growing taller, his bone density increasing while his joints became more flexible. His sensory organs were shifting, allowing him to perceive electromagnetic spectra he'd never imagined. The Cathara was experiencing parallel changes, becoming more humanoid while retaining its natural advantages. Its artificial voice box was being absorbed and replaced by organic vocal cords that could produce human speech patterns naturally. "The other Cathara will resist this change," the creature said, its voice now a strange blend of its original clicks and human tonal patterns. "They will see it as contamination, as weakness." "Some humans will react the same way," Marcus admitted, "but evolution doesn't ask permission. It just happens." As the transformation neared completion, both of them could sense something profound occurring. The virus wasn't just changing their biology, it was creating a shared consciousness, a link between all individuals it infected. Not a hive mind, but something more like an extended family connection that transcended species boundaries. Marcus realized that when the virus spread to both human and Kithara populations, it would create a network of understanding that would make warfare not just difficult, but psychologically painful. How could you kill someone whose thoughts and emotions you could sense as clearly as your own? "You've weaponized empathy," the Kithara observed, and there was definitely admiration in its transformed voice now. "Forced our species to understand each other at the most fundamental level. Brilliant and terrifying. And irreversible," Marcus added. "The genetic changes are permanent and will be passed on to offspring. Within a generation, the distinction between human and Kithara will become meaningless." The creature that had once been purely Kithara looked at Marcus with eyes that now combined the best features of both species. "You realize that by doing this, you've essentially committed genocide against both our peoples. Humans and Kithara as separate species will cease to exist." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of what he'd done. Sometimes evolution requires extinction, but sometimes extinction is just another word for transformation. They stood in silence for a moment, two beings who were no longer quite human or quite Kithara, but something entirely new. The war between their species would continue for a while longer, but its days were numbered. As the virus spread and more individuals underwent the transformation, the biological imperative for conflict would be replaced by an equally powerful drive toward cooperation. "What do we call ourselves now?" the transformed Kithara asked. Marcus considered the question. They needed a name for what they'd become, something that honored both heritage species while acknowledging the fundamental change that had occurred. "How about Terrans?" Marcus suggested. "From Terra, Earth, the planet where this change began." "Terrans," the creature repeated, testing the word. "Yes, that seems appropriate, though I suspect our respective governments will have other names for us." "Let them call us whatever they want," Marcus said, feeling the first stirrings of his new hybrid instincts. "Names don't change what we are or what we're becoming." In the distance, they could hear the sound of approaching ships, rescue teams from both species coming to investigate what had happened at the research station. Neither group would be prepared for what they found, and both would carry the virus back to their fleets when they left. The transformation of two species into one had begun. Within months, it would be irreversible. The war between humans and Kithara would end not in victory or defeat, but in a forced evolution that would change the nature of galactic civilization forever. Marcus and his transformed companion looked at each other, and for the first time since the conflict began, both smiled. They had work to do, preparing both their peoples for a future neither species had imagined possible. The age of humanity and the age of the Kithara were ending. The age of the Terrans was about to begin.